Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And today we have a guest calling in from Northern Maine. His name is Jonathan Hayes, and it is a continuation of a story that we did last week when we talked about an expedition across Maine with a team of Seppala Siberians. Jonathan, how's it going tonight?
Hey, it's going really well, and it's an honor to talk to you, Robert.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. If you could, Jonathan, can you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Sure. I'm a sixth-generation Tennessean, and always said I was going to move where there was more snow when I was a kid. And I joined the Marine Corps, and the infantry company that I was with had us doing cold weather training at the SEER school here in Maine, with survival, evasion, reconnaissance, escape. And so that's what introduced me to Maine. And I settled here when I got out of the Marine Corps in southern Maine, but then there still wasn't enough snow. So I moved up here to the northern tip of Maine. We're actually further north latitudinally than a lot of Canadians where we're at here.
Very interesting. And you've been involved with dog sledding for about 25 years, and there's a rich history there because not only are you involved, but your kids are as well. Is that right?
Yes, sir. And I had an old timer tell me when I moved to Maine that you better find something that you enjoy doing in the winters because they're long and they'll drive you crazy if you don't find a way of enjoying the outdoors. And I loved working with dogs, and I'd never met a musher. I'd never seen a real dog sled team, but I just decided maybe I'd seen Iron Will one too many times, but I decided I was going to become a musher, and got some mushing books from the library. I know that the twins that lived there in Alaska, I got one of their books and some other books, and just made the rookie mistake everyone else made. And I started adopting show dog, pet quality Siberian Huskies, and that's how I got started.
And it sounds like your route was very similar to mine. I started with the show and obedience style Siberians, and of course I saw Iron Will. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I saw it in the theater, and I thought, wow, this is something I want to do for a living. And here we are decades later, and we're talking about that old movie right here on the radio. For folks that are listening, Jonathan's calling in from the area right where the CanAm race starts. Can you tell us a bit about that race? There's quite a bit of history there, isn't there?
It's a really great race, and it sadly has become the only remaining mid-distance race in the East. The other ones have kind of fallen by the wayside. I think we're celebrating our 25th anniversary of the CanAm Crown here in Fort Kent. This year is the 25th anniversary. And actually, Maine has, in my estimation, a mushing history, second only to Alaska and the Yukon. Some of the greats, Robert Peary, who conquered the North Pole by sled dog, summered here in Maine. Arthur Walden, who made the Chinook dogs that went to the South Pole in the Beard expeditions, raced here in Maine. And then Leonard Seppala in Togo and his team of Seppalas after the 1925 Serum run settled here in Maine in 1927 and established the first Seppala kennels here at Poland Spring, and our kennel is carrying on that namesake with the descendants of those same dogs.
And that leads us right into the topic of discussion today with an expedition you did to honor Togo and the memorial with a monument and so on and so forth. So I guess my first question, Jonathan, is how did you come about with the line of Seppalas that you have? As you said, Leonard Seppala retired there or finished there in Maine many, many years ago. But what is the history of your line?
That's a great question, and it is a storied history, and I'll give you the best Reader's Digest that I can. I had a friend that I had grown up with also in the South that had moved up here, and he had a lot of experience raising Grand Night champion coonhounds. And I took him dog sledding with my what we call fluff butts, with our fluff butts here, my Siberian Huskies. This was my first or second year mushing. And he said, I want to get into mushing. And I was like, great. And his my friend Kyle. Everything he does 100%. He said, I want to run purebreds, but I want purebreds that can win races. And again, we're talking about more than 20 years ago, and with Eurohounds and Greysters and everything that's come into the scene and become more dominant since then, winning races has become harder. But 20 years ago, Seppala Siberians were still winning races. Tamar Kennels out of Massachusetts was placing in the top 5 in the CanAm Crown. Doug Willett out west was running the stage races out west and winning many of them against Alaskan Huskies. And so I knew that there were still, a line of Siberian Huskies that could still pull it off. And he and I joined together for a while, for a few years, and then he went back to running coonhounds, and that's how I got into Seppalas. The breed was almost extinct in the 1970s, and Jeffrey Bragg, a gentleman from, I think it's Bear Valley, Yukon, he's not from there, but that's where he was living, collected the remnants from the McFowle kennel, the Shearer kennels, brought them together, and revitalized the Seppala line. And so he pretty much almost single-handedly saved the breed from extinction. But then it was another man that came after him in the 80s and 90s, Doug Willett, from out west somewhere, Seppala kennels, that proved that the Seppalas could still do what made them famous in the first place. He was winning stage races with them. And so when I came in, I got some Seppala dogs from Seppala kennels. I got some from Tamar kennels in Massachusetts and Deer Creek kennels in Wyoming. And they're still running the pedigree stage race to this day, and have a really great Seppala kennel out west.
So I'm sure everybody that's listening is very familiar with the typical Siberian Husky, very iconic looking dog. It's typically the dog that that the media uses in their portrayal of a sled team. That pricked ears, wolf looking, potentially blue-eyed dog. But a lot of folks would not know the difference between the Seppala line of the Siberians versus the more recognizable Siberian or typical line of Siberian. What are the main differences?
Well, firstly, about a week ago, I harnessed, from the South we say harness broke, but harness trained, broke is not a great word, harness trained some 5-month-old puppies, their first time in harness. It was like taking a duck and putting it in water. And after having spent a few years running mainstream Siberian Huskies before I was blessed to get into Seppala Siberians, the difference is night and day. The Seppala Siberian has not been bred for the show ring, never been bred for the show ring. In fact, according to the International Seppala Siberian Sled Dog Club rules, of which I'm a board member of that club, if there's more than 2 generations that are not working lines, they cease to be recognized as Seppalas. So it is a consistent line of, Chukchi, Kiriak Village Siberian dogs that have been intentionally bred and performance tested generation after generation. So the work ethic is exceptional, and it's just in their DNA, and it's beautiful. The way I describe it to people from the outside of the mushing world, I'd say Seppalas are what Siberian Huskies were before the show ring got a hold of them. That's pretty much how I sum it up.
So can you give us sort of the Cliff Notes version of the differences in appearance? Are they stockier? Are they heavier? Are they leaner? Do they have that typical Siberian look, or is it different for folks that may not know?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Racing pressure puts, we talk, I'm a science teacher, teach biology, life sciences, and we talk about natural selection. And racing pressure can vary in just a couple decades, can change a breed. And originally, the Seppala Siberian sled dogs and the subsequent Chukchi dogs that they imported to deepen the gene pool were variable. There was variation in the lengths of their coats, variation in their size. But racing pressure has made it much more uniform. My dogs have extremely thick coats, which makes it hard for them to run in warmer temperatures. But they are impervious to the cold, extremely tough feet, and an extremely strong drive. The things that you would probably notice when you look at our Seppalas versus a Siberian Husky, just from the outward appearance, is their ears tend to be a bit larger, and their coats seem to be denser and thicker rather than the long hair-like coats of a lot of the show dogs now. And they seem to be taller and leaner instead of stockier, like the show Siberians are.
So last question on the make of the Seppala Siberian. Are they same color variations as the typical Siberian? The black, the red, the sable gray, all of that?
There aren't reds. And I remember from, some years ago, there was a genetic reason why there aren't reds, that it was actually an introduction that caused there to be red Siberians. And that has been left out of the breed pool. So if you've got a red Siberian Husky, it's a good chance it's not a Seppala. They also are often display the saddleback. That's very common with Seppalas and less common with the mainstream Siberian Huskies.
So, Jonathan, are you still actively breeding and raising these dogs, or do you just have a team that you're working with and are comfortable with your kennel size?
No, that's a great question. We've been upping our game for the last couple of years. I have, because of where I've lived and just land and neighbors and all that kind of stuff, I've always kept a small kennel size. The most I ever had was about 11, 12 years ago. I was up to around 20. But I've maintained a kennel of 8 to 10 dogs. But we are building a new kennel as we speak. Really excited about it. And with a small kennel, as you know, you need to be training a third more dogs than you're going to race with. So if it's a 6-dog race, you need to be training at least 9. And if it's a 12-dog race, you need to be training 16 dogs for that race. And I've just not had the numbers to do that in the past. But we're really excited. Got a couple litters on the way this fall. And we're moving the kennel onto 50 acres with training trails right on it. We're really excited about that. And so we're hoping to be within striking distance of the 250-mile CanAm Crown within the next year or so.
Well, congratulations on the move and the additions to your kennel. I look forward to following you along on social media for sure. But the reason for this episode, Jonathan, was a continuation with our conversation that we had with Jeremy Grant. He is a filmmaker that was a part of a journey that you took part in. It was a expedition to honor this breed of dog and what they did in the Serum Run back in 1925, as you mentioned, but also to provide awareness and insight to this amazing animal that you have. And in our last episode, we got a great idea of, sort of the makeup of the expedition, and I encourage folks to go back and listen to that one. It's Jeremy Grant over on dogworksradio.com. So instead of rehashing that, I want to ask a few questions that we did not talk about on that episode. And first and foremost was, why take this on now in the middle of a pandemic when all that was going on, and you tried to plan this expedition and give it a go on your own?
Yeah. I'm a little bit of a history geek, and knowing the roots of the Seppala here in the state, of course, named my kennel Poland Spring Seppala Kennels because that's where Leonard Seppala's original Seppala Kennels was. And so, like a moth drawn to the fire, I just had to go to the Poland Spring Museum and walked in and started asking a whole lot of questions. This was several years ago. Started asking a lot of questions that the curator couldn't answer. So she called the current owner of Poland Spring Inn Resort, who loves dogs, and great lady, Cindy Robbins. And she came over and started sharing with me photos of Leonard Seppala, Elizabeth Ricker with Togo, and all of this great stuff that, you don't get to see just by taking a tour through the museum. And so we developed a friendship, and we've kept that friendship going for 6 or 7 years. And they decided there that they wanted to build a monument, a statue of Togo at his final resting place there in Poland Spring. And it's a really beautiful statue that's been designed. And I had been wanting to do an expedition across the North Woods of Maine, but I needed a theme. I needed something that, would drive it. The timing had to be right, and the timing was just never right. I wanted to do it, but it was, a man without a mission. And she called me in January, and this past January, and said, we want to build this monument, and we're starting to raise funds. And it just clicked with COVID being in effect. The CanAm Crown sled dog race had been canceled for the year. And I said, what's the coldest week of the year? We're gonna run this expedition, and it raised a lot of awareness, and it raised some good funds. We've got, I think we're about 2/3 of the way there now, money wise, to raise money for this. And I really think there's no better time to run an expedition that commemorates the Serum Run, saving the children of Nome from an outbreak of diphtheria by bringing antitoxin there. There's no better time to do that than when you're in the middle of a pandemic. And it brought a lot of hope to our state. So many people in our state were unaware. The Togo movie came out a couple of years ago, but so many people in our state were unaware of the connection that Maine had to that great story. And so it was the perfect time to do something I'd been wanting to do for a while.
And Jonathan, I'm sure you're aware that we have a whole bunch of ardent Iditarod fans that listen to our show, especially during our nightly coverage of the race in March. And I'm sure a lot of those fans have been to the Iditarod headquarters right down the road from here in Wasilla, Alaska. And tucked away in a corner is Togo himself, right there.
Yes.
On display in the Iditarod Museum, an exceptional work of taxidermy. All of these years later, the dog still looks very good there on display all these years later. Have you had a chance to visit that museum or been to Alaska?
I have not. My brother is also teaching. He's on the North Slope in Barrow, Alaska, right now on a teaching contract there in the public schools. But I have not had the opportunity to go to Alaska. I did know that he is there, and would love to see that someday. In fact, I was just telling my wife before I came on. I said, Robert interviews Iditarod racers. I feel like a poser compared to these people, but it's really just it's an honor to be on here and to be talking to so many people that have competed in the Iditarod and are fans of, like I am. I'm a huge fan of the Iditarod and the mushers.
Well, Jonathan, now you are a part of mushing history with this expedition, and in particularly if you are able to build this monument that you're raising funds for. I think that's a huge accomplishment. We started the conversation talking about the movie Iron Will and how that introduced us to the sport of mushing, and a lot of I'm sure what you think about as the sport you thought about when you watched that movie. And the next generation of mushers watched the movie Togo on Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came out last year or the year before. It's all running together now. But Hollywood and Disney in particular, as it will, provided us an exceptional movie, but it was Hollywood on both Iron Will and Togo.
Yes.
What was your thoughts about the movie and how it portrayed not only this serum run relay, but also the dog in general?
I have to give kudos. They usually completely destroy stories. I don't mean Disney. I just mean Hollywood in general. So don't take that personally, Disney. But yeah, I had written 3 books, and my wife told me you should write a children's book, and I was like, and this was before the Togo movie came out, and I don't want to write a children's book. But she said, no, it would really do well. You should write a children's book, and because I knew so much about Togo, I figured I would write a children's book about that, and it's True Tales of Togo the Sled Dog, and it's probably outsold all the other 3 combined. So I should listen to my wife a little bit more, I guess. But so I dove in even deeper to the story of Togo before I wrote that, to make sure that all of my facts were straightened. And of course, being a Seppala Siberian sled dog kennel, just the history of it's really important to me anyway. So I feel like they really did a good job. I don't fault them for wrapping up the story as though Togo spent the rest of his life living and breeding in Alaska, because you've got to land the plane somewhere, and you've got to wrap up the story somewhere, and it made a nice package end for the end of the show. But that's the biggest criticism that I have of it is, obviously it leaves out the rest of the story where Seppala and Togo came here and beat Arthur Walden at Poland Spring Dog Derby in 1927, beat Arthur Walden and his Chinooks, and Goddard from Quebec over the next year or so, and really showed in the East that these little Siberian rats, as they were called, were a force to be reckoned with against any sled dog type anywhere, and that happened here. And of course, they can't tell everything, so they left that out. But it's a great part of the story that we want people to know about.
So in the movie lore of the Serum Run, there was a heck of a lot of story played to another dog in the relay, Balto, and of course that became a very famous dog. There's statues of him not only in downtown Anchorage but also in Central Park, and he received a heck of a lot of the fame. Why do you think that is?
Well, yeah, that's the really great part of the children's book that I wrote is expressing that to the dogs it doesn't matter who gets the glory, but to the mushers it mattered. It mattered who got the glory. Leonard Seppala and with his leader Togo went over 261 miles, crossing the Norton Sound Bay ice twice. Not only, dramatically overshadowing the mileage of any other team, but putting themselves in, significant danger by crossing the sea ice twice to do that. Balto, of course, was on the very last relay and was allowed to come into Nome. So he received all of the press, and they actually looked for Seppala and Togo, but Togo had run away to chase reindeer. So, and not caribou, reindeer. They've been raising reindeer in Nome, in that region. I don't know if they still do, but so he was off either chasing caribou or reindeer, and so he wasn't available for photos when they wanted them. And Fox was Balto's co-leader, and Fox was the primary leader of that team. But the press was not interested in Fox. Balto had the look that they were looking for, and I don't think we have to bash Balto to talk about how great Togo is, And I'm just I think both of them have a great story to tell. But I will say that Balto was also in Leonard Seppala's kennel, and he was left at home when Leonard Seppala picked his team. I think it was like 22 dogs. He left Balto at home because Seppala didn't feel like he made the cut to be on the team. So it can be frustrating, I'm sure, for a musher when he's got all these exceptional dogs and a dog that he feels like is not up to the standard ends up getting so much credit.
So, Jonathan, with the limitations of radio, we are up against the clock with our time today, and I definitely want to continue this conversation because we have not even got into the topic of the expedition itself and why and how and all of that you took on. Would you mind staying with us, and we'll air a part 2 next week?
I'd be happy to.
All right, very good. So, guys, this is your notice that we're going to continue this conversation with Jonathan Hayes next week right here on Dogworks Radio. Please set your reminders to listen in, or do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and you will get a notice as soon as the episode drops. So we are out of time, and on behalf of my guest today, Jonathan Hayes, this is Robert Forto for Dogworks Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio. Did you know that Alaska Dogworks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dogworks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.